I don't know. Let me know when we're live. Good evening and welcome to our work session to talk about East Main Street improving downtown Radford. We're glad that you're here with us. This has been a project that we've been talking about for quite some time as a need and a desire culturally, socially, and recreationally in the city. So it's an exciting time to come together. Just a little history of this. The Regional Commission has helped us for the last few years with a study to review what is needed, what's desired, what could be done, and we're pulling all those elements together. So at this time, I'll turn it over to David Ridpath and turn your mic back on, and we'll rock and roll. All right.
All right, good evening. We're really excited tonight to make our presentation. As you all know, we've had a lot of players involved in this project, and we started out pre-COVID, and then COVID hit, so it's taken some time. Department of Housing and Community Development originally gave us a grant for the project, and the presentation to you all was done about this time last year. So we've been working on moving it into the next phase. As you all know, we've, for the last 6, 7, 8 years or so, we've been working extensively on West Main Street, everything from cosmetic and physical improvements to pedestrian improvements, the Triangle Plaza, sidewalk replacement, lighting improvements, trying to make signage look better, landscaping, green space. All of those elements have come into play, including parking. So we spent several years on that. We want to jump now down to East Radford. It's been a number of years since that we've done any projects in that area. The planning grant have helped kick us off on that. This is a very, very extended. We're going to be going through kind of the basic stuff pretty quickly. Conceptual plan, you may recall from the master planning that we got this time last year. It includes a number of, and we're calling them elements and not phases, although there are going to be phases to this within the elements themselves. But the overall elements include the East Main Street project area, which runs roughly from about Harrison Street down to Tyler Avenue, all of East Main. And then we've got a trail improvement project embedded with that that's ARC funded, and as well as some amenities associated with crosswalks and things like that that are in that part of the project. And then we've got the 3rd Avenue parking lot that we've been talking about off and on for a good number of years. So all of this centers around planning. All of it centers around getting some scheduling. We're hoping, with the economy and inflation and all, that we're able to get some things rolling here just as quickly as ARC gives us the go-ahead to start spending money, and then getting some things so that we can start really seeing what it's going to look like. It's going to take some time. Again, it is a phased project, and so wanted you to be able to take a look at a lot of the different pieces of that. I am pleased to introduce all of our staff that's worked on it, as well as the Regional Commission. Eli Sharp has been the project administrator for the project from the Regional Commission. Joy Rumley is the project manager for us, and then Kathleen Armstrong has handled the conceptual planning and engagement piece of that. And then our team has included Kim Repass, the Economic Development Director, Melissa Skelton, the Community Development Director and Planning Director, and then we've all worked together, and Jay Eanes, who's not in here, from the engineering side, and then of course we've involved all of our departments. We've been meeting fairly regular to look at all aspects of this, because it's going to be everything from roadway paving to sidewalk improvements to lighting improvements to everything it could take to get the project down there going, and then get investment in our East Main Street from the private sector. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Eli first, and he's going to tell you a little bit about how the project got going. Advance it right there. Thank you, Eli.
All right, thank you, David. The Regional Commission is absolutely thrilled to remain involved with this project. We've been engaged for 3 or 4 years now, and the city did a great job, really, right out of the gate. They wanted to hear from the community, local stakeholders, business owners, property owners in the community, and so the plan was the first step. We had a very specific set of project goals that we wanted to work through and achieve, mainly identifying physical and economic blight. We wanted to decrease any vacant or underutilized properties, And then we also, as an outcome, wanted to identify lower cost, high benefit projects so that you could see a number of results and not just a focused area on a single project. So in community engagement, we actually initially reached out and had several focus group conversations with, again, the local business and property owners. We then launched a robust virtual engagement tool, Bang the Table. And we got a lot of great input. We heard from a lot of community members who shared a lot of really great ideas. We had a really extensive survey that everyone completed, and then we had kind of these little hot topic, hot questions, things that we launched every couple of weeks. We even had an idea board where people could share examples of things that they liked in other communities, and people could like them, which was really nice to engage the community. Moving forward, we see this same tool, Bang the Table, being a resource for you all to communicate and be transparent about the progress and the initiatives that you would like to focus on over the next several years as you start implementing the projects downtown. We also went on campus to Radford University. That was a really fun couple of days where students provided their input. We heard loud and clear kind of the things that they were looking for, including outdoor dining. They loved the free parking. They loved the architecture, the buildings downtown. Maybe trying to incorporate some green spaces were some of the things that they shared with us as well. And so this is that Bang the Table site that I was telling you about. We're ready to launch this again, moving away from the engagement aspect. However, we can still quick poll if we'd like to see how the community is reacting to our progress downtown. It's definitely something we can consider. But you can see we've moved from plan creation and we're now into plan implementation. This tool identifies who the key points of contact are, Kim Repass being the primary contact at the city. If there's any questions about the planning documents or the analysis, Joy can respond to those inquiries. You can also download the plan that we completed a couple of years ago, and also the Cooper Carey Retail Vision, which was a really great document, which kind of just got a whole lot of ideas sparking. And I think that the idea is to really just inspire people, get them to grab a hold of an idea and see it across the finish line. The last thing that you can get access to is the pre-planning analysis documents that we created, which include a parking analysis and a building vacancy analysis. So if you'd like to get into the weeds and take a look at some of the data, all that is available online for the public to check out. But what we're most excited about is some of the recent announcements for funding that are going to assist the city in moving the project forward. And I'm going to turn it over to Joy, who's going to tell you more about that.
Okay, you should have in front of you a copy of sorry, there we go. Is that better? I'm shorter than Eli. You should have in front of you a copy of this presentation as well as much larger visuals in front of you so you can see a little bit more of the detail. Let me go in the right direction. So I'm going to be talking about the ARC project, which was one of the elements that was noted in the bigger picture that David showed. Initially, it follows down kind of the alleyway that parallels East Main up Virginia Avenue, down mid-block of East Main to what we're calling the community gathering space, which is now just kind of a parking lot, which we'll go into some of the visuals here in just a second. So just talking about the ARC scope. So when you look at that community gathering space, you'll see it in the upper hand corner what it looks like today. And these are just some concepts, some visualizations to give you guys an idea of what this area could be in the future. And so we're looking at flexible vendor space, if we have open markets or events, arts, music, crafts there, as well as some placemaking signage, which we'll see in the next photo, but space for pedestrians to cross there safely. It's kind of a mid-block crossing, as well as additional outdoor seating and dining. I'm going to go ahead and switch to the next one. You can see we have planned to have food trucks in this space, and you can see some more lively crosswalk space, as well as where folks can provide music in this space. And we've talked with city staff about how to program this space throughout, May to September kind of time frame. And keep this an activated space. Again, these are just visual concepts. This is not in stone. These are not construction documents by any means, but give you a really good idea of how to make this a focal place for the downtown. Okay, and then as you're standing on East Main, looking in the west direction, you can again see the current conditions, how it looks, and then with some of these bump outs and safer pedestrian crossings, what this space might look like. Again, these are just concepts. When you look at the lighting, it was important for us to think about how you light for vehicles and folks traveling by vehicle or car, but also have those lights that shine down so that pedestrians also feel safe in this area. That was one of the comments that we had from some of our surveys, and that would really brighten up East Main, provide some greenery, appropriate greenery. And this, again, this won't be exactly how it looks, but gives you a good visual of what this space might look like. Money, all these things cost money. So you have secured and been awarded $700,000 from the Appalachian Regional Commission, that's ARC. And to match with that, the city has committed $1.7 million in non-ARC funds, and that comes from some of your VDOT maintenance funds, your Community Development Block Grant Program, some of the ARPA funding that you have received that will be local city funding. So again, these are what we've provided as the grant application. We know construction costs may change, but this is what we're looking at, which will include a multipurpose trail, which will, as I mentioned, the little alleyway that connects behind East Main, I guess connects Harrison through kind of the behind some of those buildings so that people, pedestrians and bicycles can easily navigate to get to the gathering space very easily without being on East Main where it's a little more heavily trafficked. Some screening and fencing because you know it goes right there by the railroad tracks, so we want to make it an attractive place for folks, as well as some of those pedestrian safety features, wayfinding, so people can navigate when they're in downtown. And then our project schedule, we're right in the pre-contract phase with ARC where we're getting some paperwork for them. They're asking us for more paperwork, but we anticipate signing a contract very shortly. Construction documents are also underway. We've had some survey work being done currently, but design will be throughout the winter, and we anticipate those to be finished in February or March. And then project going out to bid in, that should actually be 2023. Sorry, we didn't catch that. March, April of 2023 with construction beginning in April, May of 2023. So when people are asking about timeline, as you know, all good things take time, so.
In about a 6-month construction timeline, are you thinking for this first section?
Yeah, depending on pieces we do.
Mhm.
Something like that.
Those are always best laid plans, but yes, a 6 to 9 month construction period, so throughout 2023. And then last but not least, we don't have a funding announcement yet, but I've been given very good promise that we do have a $7,000 grant in for a mural that potentially could be on this building here and kind of point people to the river, that we'll be building a trail down to the river, which they'll talk a little bit more about in a minute. But did want you to know that that is pending, but we feel really good about it. So that might be some additional resources coming to town to kind of give some of that visual pop in the downtown district. That's all of my piece. There's a little bit more. I'll turn it over to Melissa.
And what we're going to do, try to give you an overview of everything, and we'll come back and get questions.
Yep.
From time, just to get every piece of it.
Sounds good.
As David has shared earlier, there are a number of elements that are a part of the whole master plan of this district, one being the 3rd Avenue parking lot. As you're aware, this parking lot is very underutilized and has been for as long as we can remember. One of the challenges is dealing with the access, dealing with the lighting, and it not being friendly for pedestrians coming in and out. With having a number of our apartments being developed in the downtown district, we really find it's important to be able to connect this parking lot with the district and all the new opportunities for the apartments in downtown. We've been working with Hurt and Profit, who have done the design. They provided us with a number of concepts, and David, Jay Eanes, and I really honed in on this one, feeling it would maximize the parking elements. We will be working on cost of the project and finding funding sources moving forward.
If we can make funding work on, I will add a comment there, but I'll forget. If we can make the funding work on the Third Avenue project, throughout the entire study, you recall parking, loading zones were a couple of the big things. We don't want to give up parking and loading zone areas that would cause any problems for our businesses or for the continued development of residential. So all that's been taken into account and follows the study planning. As you will recall from the plan, we did have an excess in parking areas, so that is working to our benefit as we're going along. So we want to make these areas attractive so that people will go there. I mean, if your Third Avenue seems like a long ways away, but it's really not. But if we can tie that in, make it walkable, make it look good, I think we can make all that piece of it go. So just know that all comes in.
And none of the Third Avenue planning, construction, or anything is reflected in that 2.7, yeah, separate project.
We had originally planned on CDBG funding for that. It's because of some of the things that it's going to take. We would be many years using CDBG, so we're looking at things like the Section 108 plan,
Right.
Some other grant possibilities. Regional Commission, again, I can't say enough about this team, and they're helping us find grant possibilities as well as anything that might be coming out of infrastructure or any of the other programs that might be out there that we might qualify for.
And potentially, and we can get in more into this in a minute, that's one we could phase as well, potentially, some of it.
Yeah, we got to get the underground first. It's
Yep.
phase one, and then, yeah, we'll do best we can, but unfortunately, it looked like it wasn't going to phase quite as well as we had hoped. So
Okay.
we'll see how that piece of it works.
All right.
We may have to look at something different funding-wise.
What you want on that parking lot, but if we don't have good signage, they're not going to use it.
It's hidden, and, you know, you won't realize it's 100 feet from
Yeah.
parking lot to East Main.
It's shorter from there, from that parking lot, than it is from the parking lot in Walmart to the back end of the Walmart store.
They're taking into consideration all of those ideas, making sure that it's friendly for pedestrians, people living in the apartments, as well as those visiting downtown.
Good. That's great.
Joy touched on the trail that we have been talking about. I think this is a piece that we've been missing for quite some time. We've talked about this for years and how to connect our downtown to the river, and so we're hoping that this will be the time that this will happen. This will connect from Harrison Street down to Bissett Park. We're still working with some owner issues, but we feel like this is the key element that's been missing in a lot of our conversations that we've had about connecting our downtown to the river. David wanted me to touch on a little bit about the economic impact that this revitalization plan will have on the city of Radford. I think it goes without saying. I'm of the philosophy that if you build it, they will come, and I think that is exactly what is going to happen. We are making those quality public investments, which include walkability, green spaces, and those public improvements. We've talked about connecting the downtown to the river, which is that key element that we've been missing. We're creating a gathering space, which is what we did in West Main with the Triangle Lot, and we saw how that affected our community, and it also spurred additional development, which I believe is what's going to happen downtown. You're seeing those gathering spaces where we can have festivals and food trucks, and we're creating a space where people can come and have lunch and dinner and enjoy downtown. I also think it's important that we continue to make those diverse spaces with mixed use. We're already seeing a lot of these improvements downtown where you see the businesses on the bottom and the living spaces on top, which is big what we're seeing across the country. And I think the most important thing in dealing with economic impact is that we're making our downtown a destination. So that when you come downtown, you're able to stay for the day. You're enjoying coffee, you're enjoying breakfast, you can have lunch, see a concert, go to the movie, and walk the trail. So I think that's the important part here is we are making now our downtown a destination.
Yes, if we can, we have only one railroad crossing down there at Harrison Street. And it's a sore spot with the railroad, I know. But if there's any way we can expand that, improve that crossing there, I think it would be a big gateway to the trails and to Bissett Park and so on.
So in the end, all these elements come together while we're treating it as somewhat three distinctive projects. As you can see, they're all tied together. From the economic development perspective, they all make sense. It's what makes the plan work. We've taken more attention to, all the survey results that have come in. As was mentioned, Eli mentioned it from the beginning, to tie walkability, livability, sustainability, and places for people to shop and to eat and to be entertained. So all of those come together in this, these three elements of this plan, with the ability to expand and leap from there. And then the big tie-in that we've wanted for a long time is to be able to, while you can't see the river, if we can make that river feel in signage and wayfinding and that connection with the trail, you do have that feeling that you can get it tied together. And this is probably one of the few times we have control through ownership or leases of nearly all the parcels that are important in this. We've got a pretty good idea of how the phasing is going to work, reasonable approach as it relates to finances. As y'all know, I'll be right dogging that the whole time, so making sure that we stay on target. I think everybody's gotten annoyed with me at meetings because I keep going back to the money piece to make sure it makes sense. But we got a great team. Everybody's got some fantastic resources to bring to the table. As you all know, with our abilities between water and electric and public works, we're able to construct and put together many of these elements, basic elements from this. Now, some of the questions you're probably asking, we got that big grant from VDOT, which will be repaving all of East Main Street from generally the entrance to Bissett Park all the way to the city limits. We're going to try to have the elements of the bump outs and things done, so by the time that comes through, we won't be redoing. We can't guarantee we're going to have all of it done, but we're going to be pretty close that we won't have to dig back up. I can't turn the VDOT grant down. It's too much money and too much need. So we're going to keep moving with that, and then we're looking at options, with pressed asphalt crosswalks and things like that. So I think that's generally, can you all think of anything that we've missed? We've tried to cover a lot really fast. Glad to see our partners, Beautification Commission and the EDA are here. Of course, Planning Commission's been involved in this. I think all of them have had a role, either being at meetings or we're going to have input in it as we're moving along. I know some things we would like faster than others. We're trying to keep in mind, the seasons to dig when it comes to beautification, and when there are other sub-grants, we can get on that. And then also with cold weather coming, that's got us a little concerned about concrete and all. And as Joy had mentioned, the all-important thing is making sure that when we release this, that ARC is going to let us count all of our in-kind towards our match, and we can't be ahead of them. So it's going to take a couple more months to get all that together, but it's an exciting project. It's going to take several years, but it's going to look really good when it's done.
So what I'd like to do is kind of go through a couple of things with some questions, give folks a chance to weigh in and talk from there. Can we talk the trail first? Since that kind of ties everything together, and go from there. So one piece of it, and I know we probably haven't had enough discussion with the railroad about how we navigate the tracks and everything along that line, but
There you go.
yeah. But what are we thinking the trail would be like from the area there in front of the Bondurant construction site, across from the gas place, all the way down to the New River Sports Complex?
Joy, you want to jump on that one?
So we're still talking with engineers. I think the original concept was something like Wildwood. But they can plan up to where you could drive a car down there. I mean, you can do any level of improvements. But I think our initial thought was perhaps mimic what Wildwood looks like with very natural materials, and then perhaps do a trail counter, see how many people are using it. If it's a highly used trail, maybe then over time the city can upgrade it in some way, make it larger, depending on how it's used for bicycle, pedestrian, like that. But I think the initial thought maybe for using the public works crew perhaps to save
Okay.
some funding, that it would be very much like Wildwood. Is that?
No, yeah, that's what I wanted to.
Yeah, it's going to be kind of just get that connection in first and then go for those bigger grants that would
Right.
maybe.
Would we be looking at mostly a gravel trail to start with, or would we do a
Probably
10-foot pave?
ash or something like
Okay.
that to start with. And it may be combinations of that depending on slopes, because we've got to keep in mind
Yeah, there's a
throughout the
significant
project about
elevation change.
erosion and where this shows a nice level we think can work, it may actually end up being a switchback.
What was
that
the
goes
old
there.
road that went through there? There was an old road that went down there at one time. Didn't Harrison Street connect further
Yeah, it's
through
just
there?
a little further to the left of the slide.
Okay. Are we able to follow any of that old road bed?
Looking, but it puts it, you get so far over in that direction, it may be another alternative to get over to Bissett, but it puts you pretty far down. We're trying to get you to the river as quickly as you can.
Well, and
This
getting
one
down
would-
to the New River Sports Complex is not a bad thing, because that's halfway between Bissett and the Dedman Center, or more further along.
And we talked about getting people from Main Street to the river, but also we want to get people from the parks
Right.
and the facilities down there, because if they're at the New River Sports Complex playing a game, we want them to easily be able to walk up, or
Right.
at least be able to get as much information as possible to be able to come up into Main Street to eat and dine and things
And
like
this
that.
path makes more sense than turning more to the right and coming down out at Veterans Field?
Yes.
Okay.
Mostly because of control of the land, because this puts us right out on, as
Okay.
soon as you get across Stockton there, West Street, as soon as you cross over, you're right on, well, that's West Street.
Okay.
You're pretty much on our property.
I worry about that pedestrian crossing there of the railroad surface crossing. We'll be encouraging more pedestrian traffic going over that crossing.
Yeah, we'll have to have a conversation. I
Have
mean,
to-
in a perfect world, it'd be great if we could have an elevated crossing that would get us where we need to go, but that's probably $1 million by itself, if not more.
Sidewalk currently goes all the way down to the track now.
Yeah.
And they've been, what the railroad would like is to see us abolish that crossing. Every time we get into a discussion with them about anything, they say, well, if you'll give us back the crossing, then we'll do this, or if you give us, they've said that.
Well-
That's been their policy from their legal standpoint, is to reduce the number of surface crossings because they're high liability crossings.
And I think, in adding to that and thinking aloud, with what we're looking at doing, there's a possibility there could be like a park and ride right there, so that you may not be encouraging the walking across the tracks. I mean, if we can get folks to drive to there, at least you're getting back out of your car and walking to the river, or the frontage or something. So there's some possibilities for that as well. Again, this is conceptual. Just so you know, the stages right now, Hurt and Profit is doing engineering. Well, they're doing the survey work first, and that finishes up. Do y'all remember when, or sometime?
I was going to say, it's pretty close. They've been all up and down Main Street. I've seen
As
them.
soon as that's done, then we'll have a better idea of what we control as far as
Okay.
alleyways, paths, sidewalks, and things like that. So we'll
And
have
that
that.
impacts the eastern portion of this, right? Which is why we probably don't have much up there, because they're still figuring that out? From
correct.
the parking lot further toward Tyler? Okay.
Yes. So once we have that in hand, then we'll start the elements of it. Logically speaking, we're thinking that from the Truist Building there at Tyler Avenue,
Yeah.
I don't want to get into a lot of details, but from the Truist Building at Tyler Avenue down to Virginia Street on the north side, that's the easiest part of the project. Eliminating some of the, making the sidewalk look better, lining up entrances where, like the old Hardee's that used to be there is
Right.
gone, but a lot of those entrances are still in place, because you want to try to make it as smooth as possible. We'll be working with all the players down through there. So anybody that's watching this on TV, we're going to be on Facebook or on our YouTube channel. Just know that we're going to be getting in touch with you as we're going along, to be sure that everybody is in tune with what we're doing with the accesses and things like that. So from Tyler Avenue to Virginia Street, north side would be first. And that would include the sidewalk, the decorative elements of the sidewalk. It would include the lighting. Our general goal is to double the street lighting in that area. So that's going to look really good and be a big safety improvement. And then and also what landscaping is associated with that, and the parking lots as well. So once all those pieces are together, That will kind of give everybody an idea of what it's going to really look like. It's great to look at a picture. You know, it's hard to get all the pieces of it together at one time, but that gives you an idea of what it will look like, and, you know, we can really tout that in the next phase, which the south side of the street is always more complicated because that's where the sidewalks and all are right up against the building. So you got to, as you're taking sidewalk up, you're working with building owners, being able to make sure that they have got access to their property. While there's not a lot on that side, that's easy. That part of it's communication and taking a little bit at a time. So it's going to take a while to get up the street, and then we want to make sure that we've got the crosswalk aspects, the one that's coming out almost directly across from the theater, which is the mid-block. One of the most common things I think we heard about in the survey was you're having to walk all the way down to the crosswalks to get over. The other one is whether it's a raised area, which is the Virginia Street Plaza, or whether it's just you know, the 4 crosswalks that are
Right.
there, or raised with the landscaping element. Can you all think of some other things, just trying to give them an idea, council an idea of some of the finer details? Again, looking at every possible way in all this. You know, a $5,000 forestry grant can help us with landscaping, with the trees. We know of at least 1 or 2 private donors that are willing to want to do something down there, and then that could be in the form of our benches and things like that. So it's gonna look really good.
So let's talk a little more about that crosswalk if we can, the mid-block crossing. That's one of those pieces that has the ability to make a lot of change. There are already people that basically do that. I think we're losing, what, 20 spaces in that where the Hardee's was? Is that correct? 20-ish? Does that sound about right? Is it that many?
Yeah, but the way it's working out, the gathering space would just be for certain events. We still hope to be able to double it up. It's still
So we
surface
can still
parking.
use some
Yeah.
parking?
Yeah.
Okay, and,
I think it's 12.
okay, I wondered about that. And it looks like again, I know these are just conceptual, so they're not final renderings, but it looks like while we're doing that, we would expand the little medians that are in that parking lot that are dividing it. So if you go back, yeah, that looks like those areas, we'd have more green space, potentially even be, one of the ideas when the Beautification Commission and I were walking the street was to talk about, could we even have like a little play area down there or something like that? That could potentially be a location for something like that might be a little space, or maybe at the Wells Fargo connector to this lot that we control that might have a little green space or something like that.
Yeah, greening up is essential to make this project go. And then we didn't talk a whole lot about it, but the traffic calming, we've got the median that we have put in on the upper end. It's got a ways to go, but at least the median's in before cold weather. And then the university and the city are working to replace trees on the other median there in front of the university area, and then all of it will be tied in. We have not turned the corner, but that would be the next phase, turn the corner and go up 3rd Avenue, and then also go up Tyler Avenue.
With this, if you'll go back one more slide. To the left there, that sample signage, and I know we've talked a lot about this, that's kind of what we're honing in on, correct? Having some of the signage that looks similar to that, where it would be replacing some of the signs that are there, having the Radford icon on top, and then the directional signs to show people where to go for things. And then we were thinking too that there would be bigger parking signs with like arrows and things like that. That would be a part of it.
Yeah, let's see. So
I
we have
didn't s-
wayfinding
yeah.
signage in that part of the budget. It may be a little bit, we'll have to figure out which ones make
Right.
the most sense. I do think marking parking would be incredibly important. And then the signs you see here are more for pedestrians. That would
Right.
not be for, obviously, traffic is not gonna be able to read that as quickly, but definitely look at some of that. And I think I'm not sure which plan it was in, but we did have kind of your directional and then pedestrian as well.
Right, and I just wanted to point that out to folks that I think that's what we're kind of honing in on is some stuff that looks like that. It'll have the city branding and then flexible little sign spaces that can direct people as
City
needed.
Hall,
right.
Park here, Bissett, well, some Radford University, some of the big key points of interest that people would be looking for.
And ultimately, as we make improvements to some of the directional signage and wayfinding through the city, this might inspire us for some other places where we have wayfinding signage
And gateway
that's a little
signs, yeah.
dated looking.
Yeah, our wayfinding signage is 20 years old,
Right.
so it would get a facelift with all this other.
Right.
make the letters or
Right. With this mid-block crossing, we're not thinking of any signal lights, but it might be something more along the line of a little flashing pedestrian crossing type thing, or what are we thinking from a
Haven't
safety
gotten that
standpoint?
far. Of course, we'll be teaming up with VDOT. They have a big say in your signage and
Right.
what you do on Route 11. We have been in conversation with them on getting our signalization system. We know one of the things that will improve is putting the eyes on top of each
Yep.
of the signs, but each of these signals, not looking at that as a part of the project, but an independent piece of it. If we can get elements of that in so that the lights do a better job of communicating, especially that one between 3rd Avenue, Harrison Street, and Virginia all need to be communicating together to make that piece of it work. And then haven't decided for sure, but maybe just a paint up of the poles, something to make it look good with the rest, everything else. But that will be one of those elements that will have its own ground.
And from a lighting standpoint on the next slide, if you could go back to that next slide, next one, I guess, yeah. So looking at the dual lighting, so they have this in Boone, North Carolina. That's where I've seen it well exhibited. I think some other university towns use a lot of this when you have a lot of foot traffic, where you have the larger, more highway type wattage of light up at the top, and then you have a lower light that's more close to people and go from there. With the first phase where we'll be doing the north side, which on this, facing this side, this would be the left side of the street, are you anticipating going on and putting in some of those lights fairly early?
Yes, yeah, all of that would happen. So when you look at the right-hand side of the street, the north side of the street, that will give you an idea of what everything else is going to look like when we move across, and that includes all that spacing and all. The neat thing about this, one of the things we had been following is to protect your skyline. If you put the cover over it, then you still see stars and all that,
Right.
as opposed to just having diffused light. So that was one of the goals in the program, to keep the sky looking good. One of the exhibits you saw where we're putting the twinkle light, whatever you call it.
Right, in the, yeah, that's
like
two
patio
slides
lights,
back in the.
will hang over the
Yeah.
public areas, kind of like they
Yep.
do over the Carson Courtyard.
And I like that. In fact, I would love to see us do even more of that wherever we have a little parking or gathering space, just to even put up a pole or two with those little lights, because that adds a charm and it kind of draws people to it to say there's something more here. It doesn't feel as industrial as the, formal street lighting does, but I mean, this looks amazing. Now, I know this is conceptual, and I realize it's not an architectural drawing, but I think this will give much more of a sense of place. And when we look at it at the other side, looking at the Radford Theater, looking at some of the buildings, I think that'll give it a very nice look as well for folks coming down to visit. Well, that's the questions that I have. What other questions do we have, Council, for right now?
Well, on the lighting, of course, you do trade-offs. For efficiency, you trade off decorativeness. Like, we have very decorative lights on the west end. They're expensive because the lower they are, the lower the wattage has to be, which means the more of them there has to be in order to reach the level you want. And so this is a more efficient light, but it doesn't have the charm of the lights on the west end.
I got to tell you, we cheated a little bit on this drawing, because that's what we were able to get artwork on. It will be a fluted pole.
Right.
It is decorative, and then where the light arm will be one that casts down, similar to what's
Be
there
like an
now on the
acorn?
street.
An acorn.
The one that's going over the
Like Blacksburg has?
Yeah, the one that's going over the sidewalk will mirror what we've got as our theme. It'll
And
be
we can throw flowers on there too.
we've got flowers and banner.
Banners.
Yeah.
Actually, yeah, banner. You can see the
Yeah.
banner on there on the one on the
Oh, yeah.
right. Well, both of them, banners and hanging baskets where appropriate. And we'll put our flag holders for the American flags, things like that, all will be custom for this.
And correct me if I'm wrong, David, they're working on a photometric study
Yeah.
as well, so we'll have all that taken into
And
consideration.
some of them will be
Yeah.
Radford University banners, and some of them will be Radford banners.
Yeah, one of the things that is a little tricky with all of this, regardless of the funding, but it's supply chain. We're going to have to order lights. We're trying to figure out how that piece of it works in ARC, so we're not waiting all the way to next year, because we've got a 9 to 12-month lead time on ordering lights. So we would like to get those ordered pretty quickly once the photometrics is worked out. for at least that one side of the street, and then order the other batch, you know, a couple of months later, so that everything's coming in at the same time.
Jesse, do you have something?
Yeah, just if it was a perfect world, when we're looking, I was looking at what the community said they were really looking for, as well as Radford University, and really both of them had the same priorities of outdoor seating and attractive green space. So if all the stars were aligned and we didn't have resource issues and sourcing things going on, the green space that we're referring to, when might the community see that actually maturate and take place?
Next spring,
Yeah, so,
if I can get the bump out started, we'll be doing that pretty quick.
Okay.
yeah, so we have the funding to do what the images that you, well, we think we have the funding, it'll depend on the bids process, but we do have funding to do some of these spaces here, as well as some of the greening here. So
Beautiful.
this would allow, this space here would allow for more outdoor seating and gathering space there, that can mimic some of the amenities you do have right across the street in the little pocket park there. With those types of amenities, as well as what you've got in the triangle. And we've also kind of done a study on what you already have in the city, and we want to mimic a lot of that in these spaces too. The colors, the materials, the look, so it'll be a cohesive, it won't be its own thing down here. It'll
Since we
coincide
mentioned
with-
funding, can we talk about that for a second? Because my understanding for this is a lot of the funds we're going to use for this really can't be used for other things. That a lot of this helps us with flood control, for example, and stormwater pieces. Is that correct? Are we still?
It'd be utilities, it will be anything that's associated with economic development growth. That's what funding is supposed to be. All of it is supposed to be associated with economic development, and the ARC piece, I'm going to get Joy or Eli to talk about that in just a moment, but from all the pieces we're looking at how it generates the economic development feel and job creation. Job creation and the investment of the private sector. If you can't drive that, our job as government is to make sure that we've got the amenities there. Then the private sector comes in with their piece, with the buildings they own and their investments they're making.
And like the ARC grant, for example, required us to have a match of some of that to be able to get some of that money. So the $700,000 that we're bringing in that's new money for this project from the ARC grant required us to do some additional things too.
It was at minimum a 50-50 match, so for the 700,000, at minimum, you had to match with 700,000, but to get a scoped project that made sense for ARC, we did have to add in some other elements so that the scope made sense. And then when you factor in what those elements were and how much they cost, it was a little bit more than a one-to-one match, but again, that made the project more competitive and more attractive to the funder. And just to go back to the economic development elements a little bit too, some of the elements that ARC does look for is job creation. This project in and of itself won't create any jobs, as you know, but there are other metrics that they have us respond to, which is increased day visitors, overnight visitors, and we've calculated some of those things based on the events we think we'll be having in this space when it's all completed, as well as some private investment, which would be in the form of the facade and building renovation. So we'll see quite a bit of private investment as a result of this project. I didn't hit a button, did I?
You're fine.
Did I do that? Did it go to sleep? Oh, great. I talked with my
The main
hands.
reason I wanted to touch base on that is I have had some folks say, why are you spending all this money this way? And I wanted to point out we're receiving additional funding to the city. Some of this is money from Community Development Block Grant, which is money that we're supposed to use for this kind of project. And some of it is our ARPA funding, which is, again, supposed to be used for these types of projects. So to help people understand a little more about the why and the how and how it all works together, I wanted to just be sure that we talked about that, because that's a really important part. We're sowing these seeds to reap the prosperity for tomorrow, and that's an important piece as we go through. And Eli, do you want to touch on that?
Well, I just wanted to say that when we developed the budget, we tried to minimize the actual cash match for the city. I think it's around $400,000 total.
Right.
We're using all the existing resources, to your point that you just said. The city already has CDBG funds, they already have VDOT maintenance funds. So it's just isolating some of the improvements you had already planned to make and then using that as leverage for this grant. And so The 2.4 seems like a scary number, but you're really already there with some of the existing resources the city has.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's not all new money.
Right.
It is things that we would be, if you're going to repair a sidewalk, then go ahead and do it to this plan.
Right.
If you're going to do a curb line, go ahead and do it to this plan. So these are all pieces, because everything we spend on Route 11 are all VDOT eligible parts of projects, and even some landscaping is associated with that as well. And then the signage has been a little more of the tricky part that we'll be working through as we get into the details, and then staying focused. I guess the ARC piece is going to be we've got to follow the guidelines, because that is the federal money. We've got to follow the guidelines with ARC, which includes all of the reporting and all of the interviews with people that are working on the jobs and things like that. So that's a little bit more involved, and then we'll spring backwards out of that. Does that sound? I mean, that's kind of we got to start as that being our focus, because that's the one that's not so much our money. The other is pieces that we bring in that will add to it. So,
And I
that
mean,
makes
I'm
sense.
impressed when I look at those numbers of how much new money we're bringing into the city to make these things happen. It's not just Radford tax money. It's so much more than that to get to this important part. And I didn't cut you off too soon, did I? Did you
No.
have anything else?
I just wanted to point out too, is that it was important, as far as one of council's goals, is to look at the downtown when we're talking about job creation and economics. When we are out in the community, what we often hear is we just have too many vacant buildings. And so we also hear that it's sometimes difficult for startups to get started. And so what we're wanting to do is create this environment that people are drawn to our downtown. So it helps those businesses that have survived through COVID and a lot of hardship as of late, but also makes the properties worth more to the folks that are in them and maybe aren't doing much with them right now, because there's so much going on in economic growth around it. And so it's sort of twofold. We see it as there is that economic development piece, I think, that is really tangible. And the other point I wanted to make, coming from the Midwest, it seems like every town that I grew up in had railroad crossings, and not just at the side of Main Street, usually through Main Street or dividing Main Street. And they have figured out ways in which the pedestrians can cross safely. And so this isn't a situation where we have to necessarily recreate the wheel. There are communities all across our nation that are doing that. In fact, one of the communities I grew up in, we had, it was a cargo line right through our town. Well, now they just put a bullet train going through to Chicago. That changed the dynamic a bit, but that track is still right in the middle of our community. And so people walk back and forth and drive and ride horses back and forth. So there is a way to do it. I think that, there is a keen interest, of course, to make sure that everyone's safe doing so, and that we have, the proper safety mechanisms. But just on a positive note, that we're not the first community to have to cross a railroad track.
And Dick, I'm going to come back to you one quick second. I want to give Charlie a chance to ask a question or make a
Sure,
statement.
sure.
And what do you have?
Yeah, I had a couple of questions and comments. Well, first of all, I agree that I think doing this is going to bring a lot more in downtown. Events, foot traffic, businesses. And as that happens, we're going to go from having an excess of parking place to less parking, and probably that will require people to use our really large parking lot, the one off of 3rd Avenue behind the dentist office. And so I wondered if there's been any thoughts about, 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road, as our downtown is bustling, improving walkway from that parking lot into the downtown area.
Yes,
Because currently, people
actually-
kind of go down the little alley there most
I'll
of the
let
time.
Joy
So I don't,
cover
I
that
don't
between
have an
Cumulus.
answer, except there has been some conceptual that was done in the plan to connect from the parking area from 3rd Avenue.
Oh, good.
Be pedestrian improvements. You can kind of see a little bit of the concept there, just conceptual planning, but that is part of the project and plan. Not part of the phase we're talking about that's already funded, but
Right.
certainly an element for the future.
And I think it's important to note that when we were looking at the parking calculation, both in the original document, and this is online for anybody that wants to see, when the original document was put together, I know Melissa and Kim and I, with the Regional Commission, we talked a lot about making sure that the build-out for residential living down in that area we had enough spaces to be able to cover that, because maybe not everybody's going to be there with a car, but at least trying to do what we can. So that lot is going to be, the upper end of it will support the longer-term living. So yes, you want to be able to get down there to get to your space. And then a lot of places where, you know, our parking ends at 2 a.m., I think, 2 to 6, I believe. Some places have gotten away from that now, unless you've got a pending snowstorm or something, so that, you know, your parking kind of opens up, that after 8 or 9 o'clock, so folks that are coming in from work can bring their bag of groceries in, they can park, go, and then move, you know, take their car to work the next morning. They're off the streets before businesses open. So we're going to be looking at all those pieces that are related to parking. But to get back to your question, that while it's a concept, we see a lot of things on Third Avenue to tie the walkability to and bikeability to downtown.
Anything else?
Yeah, one other piece, the proposed walkway that goes behind the businesses on East Main Street. I was looking on Google Earth because it was kind of hard to imagine the size of that. Is that the width of that alley enough that there'll be able to be a pathway as well as some greenery in there? Because I know it's really stuck between hardscape and railroad tracks.
There's enough for a car to go back there, and I've walked it, but that will definitely be something that the architects and engineering team will look at, but that is the intent, that there would be, I know there's at least a vehicle can drive back there, because I drove back there, but,
Right.
So it's maybe a little bit wider than it looks on Google
Right.
Earth, but that
Ju-
definitely will be an element.
I mean, I know it's going to be challenging. I'm just curious if it's
Correct.
wide
Yeah,
enough to
and
do much
we've talked
with.
about having some barriers there
Yeah.
as well, so people will know they're on a trail. But again, that's gonna be, those are ideas we've conveyed to the engineering team, and they'll be designing that for us with all of that in mind as well. Did you have anything else?
I would just say that the grant included architectural style fence between the trail and the railroad, as well as additional lighting fixtures for after-hour use. And if there is space, greenery would be fantastic.
And a lot of the survey will help us be able to really make sure that what we think is possible public space is. If not, we'll have to look at Plan B.
Dick, what else do you have?
Yeah, I have to return, if I may, to the surface crossing, if I can. Our first priority as a city government is to provide a safe and secure life for our citizens, and this is why I'm on this. But the railroad also wants the same thing, because they want to minimize their liability on any surface crossing. So we need to get with them. Now, I have negotiated a contract with the railroad where everybody agreed on it, and it took 6 months to get the contract signed. It had to go through real estate, it had to go through legal, it had to go through other things. So I would say we should really get serious conversations going right away about that. Now, it would behoove them to improve the safety of that crossing, and that's what we're looking for too. So we should be able to get a meeting of the minds on that, and I think that would be helpful. Thank you.
Absolutely. I wanted to take just 2 minutes if there's any questions from those that are here, from our EDA reps or beautification reps, anything you wanted to know more about while we had everybody gathered. Do you all have any questions you wanted to ask? Okay, come on up to the mic just so that folks can hear you.
Howdy. So I was wondering, one of the things that stuck out to me, and I really like the concept, I like the idea, everything looks great. One of the things that was with the trail. So it looked like from the drawing that we're going to have to actually remove some green space to create the trail. And is there a plan maybe for mitigating, if we have to remove trees, are we going to be able to not have a neutral effect by planting these green space areas, but also maybe offset it by planting another?
Are you thinking some of the trees that would be between Harrison Street and Harrison Street
the
and
other
Park?
part of the
Yeah.
other part of the loop. So I don't know if that was built into the plan. I know that it looked like there was a landscaping budget, but I don't know if that included things like planting trees or mitigating That's part of the watershed, I think, so I think it would be
And
worth
some of
looking at.
that, again, is just natural growth. That wasn't planted or designed, so there's a lot of tree of heaven and other things through there that likely would be removed as part of this. I think we probably would be looking at some of that and any changes that would be made, similar to what we did with Wildwood and some of the other places, enhancing, maybe getting rid of undergrowth to be able to go through. So it's not going to be a broad, wide road necessarily, from what I understand. It's going to be more of a cultivated path.
Yeah, to go back to something Joy had said, the plan is to try, obviously we don't want to take any hardwoods out or anything really nice there, but if there's something, well, it's shown linear, we're really not supposed to be talking about phase 2, right? Y'all fuss at me about that, but we wanted to show the overall concept. So once that piece from roughly West Street, Stockton down there, it may meander a little bit. So yes, that will be taken into account, but we have not done a tree inventory or anything like that at this point.
Something I did want to mention is, as we're doing the plantings downtown and the crosswalks and the bump outs, one of the things that the New River Valley Regional Commission is involved with is the Plant Native program, which is using plants that are native to Southwest Virginia in the planting, so we know they're going to survive, we know they're going to thrive. So using some of those elements in the downtown, I think will help maybe mitigate some of what you're talking about, as well as looking at some of those maybe invasive species along the trail and making sure we have some of the native plantings along the trail that make sense in that area as it makes sense. So I know that's one of our
There's
programs.
landscape architects working with the
Yes.
civil engineer, so it won't be total civil engineer.
Yeah.
So if you could you bring up the concept drawing of the newly created, what is currently a parking lot, from the other view? So one of the other things is this viewscape, which I think this looks amazing. The backdrop of this does not have trees in reality. We actually have a big rail yard. I think that's what it was. And are we able to work with the railroad to potentially, if they're not utilizing that entire space, are we able to plant back there so that it actually might look closer to something like this? I'm talking about the very back side of this image where you see a line of trees that looks like they just go forever. In reality, it's barren back there.
Yeah,
You hit the fence and then it's just nothing. So it would be interesting to see if the railroad would allow us, if it's not city property, if they would allow us some way to beautify that area so that the viewscape, you're not just looking on
the main line comes to us, we won't be able to do much there, but where that gray fence is,
Yeah.
we're hoping to reserve enough area that we can plant some trees. It may take a few years to get them to really fill out across there. But yes, trying to get that nice backdrop and get rid of the kind of that old gray fence and put something up nicer there will be a
And
goal.
my guess is we were talking about green fences, how they could use greenery and provide fencing that way. I mean, I can say, I agree with you, it is very tight back there, and I can imagine the railroad is going to be very particular with what we put there because they also are looking at the safety of their lines. So the last thing they want is a big tree leaning over it. So I think that these are conceptual, and I think that we are very limited with that, but I think there are things that, we're all dedicated to do because that's the whole point of this. We want more green space, we want more activity space, but, knowing that's a rendering, we'll probably have to be creative and there'll probably have to be a lot of cooperation with them in those regards. But there are ways, and we've all looked at different renderings on how you can use greenery to create a buffer from that. So I'm sure we'll look at doing that, but trees might be a challenge.
One other point, Sandy Orr on the Beautification Commission had brought this up. We have an amazing rail history here in Radford, and having some display type boards, some things along that line that might separate the downtown from the rail yard that have vintage rail pictures and talk a little bit about that history might be another way to look at that too.
Yes.
That sort of sets a place and ties that together.
I would like to see it, and the way I was thinking about it sitting there when I was listening, is that it would be nice if we could control what we see of that.
Sure.
So what people experience as they walk up to this and what you see, I want them to be able to see the rail, because that's a huge part of Radford history. but I don't want it to be the only thing that you see.
There's a balance.
So
we
it'd be
need to
really nice
strike.
to be able to incorporate,
Yeah.
different
I
aspects.
think that's what our public, the Engage NRV, the Bang the Table site, we can put up a couple of different options and let people kind of weigh in or vote or give comment on those things. I think that's how we were envisioning using that site going forward, or for things like that, where you do want to get the public's input on final materials or concepts as we move through this process.
Right. Anything
Last-
else?
Last question,
Okay.
I promise. Last question involves sustainability, and not in the green sustainability, but actually creating these spaces is much more maintenance. I'm thinking, how are we going to be able to maintain these so that they stay nice? And have we thought through the cost of that long-term? So I don't, I don't think you have to solve the problem right now, but
Sure.
is it something that's been in consideration?
Yeah, anything we add, I'm looking at the long term, yes.
Yep.
Because we do have that ongoing maintenance that would pop up with some of this.
Yeah, I'm thinking like personnel, I mean, it's gonna take a pretty big team, I think, to maintain it and keep it looking nice and more kept. So.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anything from the EDA? Any questions, comments, thoughts? All right. Well, our plan is to provide the community with some of these documents. Thank you to everybody from staff, from Regional Commission. Thank you to everybody who's participated in this process. What you've seen this evening is a big part of tomorrow in Radford. This is what we're dedicated to building and working toward. It has been a strong community effort going on 4 years. The fall of 2018 is when we first invited our friends in from the Department of Housing and Community Development and the Main Street program to just start having a discussion of what if. The pandemic slowed us up by about 20 months, but we didn't get derailed. And now we're looking at some really good possibilities with a lot of resources that we didn't have when we started this project. And so I think there's going to be a lot in the future. But thank you again to Regional Commission and to our city staff. This is going to be a big deal for Radford over the next few years and helps us create that vision of Radford in the 21st century that we're looking for.
Let's give the team a big...
Absolutely. We're going to take about a 5-minute break. We'll adjourn our work session, take a 5-minute break, and then get back together for our regular meeting. So thank you.
Joy, Eli, thank you all so much. Thank Kathleen for us also.